Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. I got some mad light staring me in the face, so excuse me if I'm a little distracted. Today, I want to do something as part of our Windows Lab series. I have had my Windows Server 2016 Active Directory domain controller running on physical hardware for 6-8 months now, and I converted it from virtual to physical months ago because I was having some issues that I didn't understand what was causing them. Suffice it to say that I've now decided it's time to turn the physical machine back into a virtual machine. So that's what this video is all about. So I'm going to take you through it and show you what I had to do to convert my physical Active Directory domain controller to a virtual domain controller. The steps involved in that, the processes, and some of the actions you should take to prevent a disaster. So you want to be careful when you do this. Make sure you have a backup of your physical domain controller before you attempt to do this. What I'm trying to do now is that now that I have these 2 Dell servers and the 1 IBM, I'm trying to consolidate all of my virtualization into one group of 3 servers. That's MCS Production, MCS Lab underneath here, and then the MCS IBM Lab machine I have in the rack. So that's the goal of this video. So again, I cannot stress the fact enough that you want to make sure that you have a backup of your current domain controller. Don't do this unless you have some backups in place. And then I'm also going to step you through how to back up your virtual machine, some of the steps you can take to make that happen, to make this transition a little bit easier. Alright, so I've downloaded the program Disk to VHD from www.sysinternals.com, which is actually owned by Microsoft. Now what I've done is I am on my domain controller and I have run the program, and as you can see, it's going to get the system reserve label and the C drive, and it's going to combine it into a virtual hard disk file called MCS-DC01. Yes, we are going to virtualize our domain controller and move it over to the Dell R710 where I have my other production machines. So depending on the size of your hard drive, this can take a while. So I'm going to show you how I do this procedure and then how I get rid of the old domain controller and boot up. Actually, we're not going to getting rid of the old domain controller. We're going to convert it to a virtual domain controller. So this is the first part of that process, is getting all of our data put into an image file. So we'll let this run. Alright, so the disk to VHD is done. I put it on a 1 terabyte drive that I have on this domain controller. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Let's go back to, there's the D drive, and I created an export folder. So there's the image file of my current Active Directory domain controller. Now the next thing I want to do is copy this image file, which is in essence a point-in-time snapshot of my domain controller. And keep in mind, I've shut down my Exchange server, any other machines connecting to this server. It is the only domain controller in my network currently. So now that I've taken an image of it, I want to copy that image over to a network share, and I'm going to put that into my Veeam backups exports folder and just paste it right there. And we'll let this copy over, and looky there, I'm getting speeds of 112 megabytes per second, something I was unable to do with Linux. Yet another reason to stay with Windows, I guess. But anyway, we'll let this finish copying. And the copy is complete. I brought up Speccy on this domain controller so you can see that it is an Intel Core i5 at 2.8 gigahertz. It's a Sandy Bridge. It's an older processor. I've got 16 gig of memory on this machine. It's a Gigabyte Z77DS3H. Standard monitor, I've got a 400 gig serial ATA drive and a 1 terabyte serial ATA drive. And the reason I'm bringing up Specky is because when I go out and create a virtual machine to replace this, I want to try and give it the same kind of settings, CPUs, etc. So this should be a quad-core CPU. So you'll see when we go out and actually create the virtual machine to house this domain controller, how I'm going to configure that. Alright, so now I'm back over on my production machine. This is the Dell R710. And the first thing I'm going to do is go and copy that virtual machine file off of my NAS and onto a hard drive here. So I'm going to go to my NAS, I'm going to go to my Veeam Backups folder and my exports, and this is the image I want to copy. So I'm going to right click, copy, and we're going to bring this over to my P drive, to my Hyper-V. Actually, I can put it here under Virtual Machines VHD, and then I'm going to paste that image right here. So now that I have the virtual hard disk copied, I'm going to go ahead and do a new virtual machine, and just follow along with me on the wizard. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to call this MCS-DC01. Click on Next. Now I'm going to choose a Gen 1 virtual machine. Click on, because I don't have a UEFI hard drive, I just have a regular one. So we'll just do a Gen 1. Click on Next. I'm going to go ahead and give it 8 gig of RAM, just like I had on the physical machine. Now it's very important, do not connect a network adapter at this time. We just want to be able to boot up this machine and see that it's working. We'll come back and add a network card later. The other reason is I still have my domain controller up and running. This is just to make sure that we can get into the virtual machine and have access to the hard drive. So we'll click Next here, and I'm going to use an existing virtual hard disk. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to go to that P drive Virtual Machines VHD where I saved that image. Choose Open, click on Next, and click on Finish. Now the next thing I'm going to do is right click on that virtual machine I just created, go into the Settings folder, and I want to bump the processors up to 4 virtual processors. The other thing, I want to make sure that I've got my IDE drive on my virtual hard drive, and as you can see it there, and no network adapter is selected. Click on OK. Alright, so now that we have the virtual machine created, I'm going to right click and choose Connect, and then I'm going to attempt to power on that virtual machine and see if it'll boot off that virtual hard drive. Hopefully we'll get lucky here. Alright, so we're at the login screen now, and you can see we don't have a network connector, but we should be able to log in to the domain controller, well, the temporary domain controller, just to make sure everything is working properly. And of course it's going to give us an error, can't connect network drives and that kind of thing. And I'm just going to put a comment in here that we converted to VM. Click OK. Alright, now the next thing I want to do is I want to go under the device manager and clear out any old devices that are in there that are not being used anymore. So I'm going to go into device manager, and there is a way to view hidden devices. Let's see, show hidden devices. Actually, we'll have to you can see some of these drives are not in here anymore, like the Western Digital, the Seagate 1 terabyte hard drive is not in there anymore. So I want to come in here and clean up these devices. So I'm just going to uninstall them. We just want to make sure that they're not there to create a problem when the machine boots up as a domain controller. Same way with display adapter. We'll just go down and check on all of these. I'm not going to mess with any of the storage volumes or the USB. So now what I'm going to do, now that I've made that change, I'm going to go ahead and restart this one more time. Click on continue. We should be able to log in again. Again, you'll see the red icon down on the lower right hand corner indicating we don't have a network card. No big deal. Now we'll just go make sure we still have our C drive on here. Of course we must have, otherwise this wouldn't be working. So here's our C drive with all of our Active Directory stuff intact. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut down this machine. We'll just tell it hardware maintenance. Now the machine is shut off. So the next thing I'm going to do is shut down my actual domain controller because we don't need it right now and we don't want it interfering. There's nothing connected to it. We've taken our image of it. We've created our virtual machine. Now we're going to go shut this domain controller down, and then we're going to bring the virtual domain controller up and add a network card to it. So just come over here, click on shut down, and we'll just tell it hardware maintenance and continue and let it shut down. Alright, so now the moment of truth. Our physical domain controller is shut down, so now we need to come back to our domain controller on our virtual machine and come into settings, and now I'm going to go ahead and drop the RAM down to, I'm going to enable dynamic memory. I'll do the most that this can take is 2 gig of RAM. That's perfectly adequate for a domain controller where I'm working. And then I'm going to enable dynamic memory so that it'll use up to 2 gig of memory if it needs it. I'm going to go ahead and apply. I'm going to go ahead and leave it with 4 virtual processors. That's fine. Actually, I could cut that down to 2. Let's go ahead and cut that down to 2. And then now the moment of truth, we need to go ahead and connect our network adapter. And I'm going to use my network adapter subnet 5 and go ahead and apply. Now I'm going to go ahead and power on the domain controller here. Click on start. And it could take a few minutes for this to come up. And you're going to notice we have a yellow icon down here under our networking. That's fine. We're going to go fix that here in a minute. Go ahead and log in. And we can ignore that message about our network drives. Now what the first thing I'm going to do is come down here, right click on my network icon and open Network and Sharing Center. And I'm going to go out and change my adapter settings. So I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to give it back the IP address that it had originally, which is 5.1. Go ahead and enter our gateway. And for our DNS, I'm going to enter the loopback address, because that's how you're supposed to do it with a domain controller. Click OK. Click OK here. Alright, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reboot the domain controller, or the virtual domain controller. So we'll come here and choose restart, and we'll just say hardware maintenance planned. Alright, we still have our yellow icon. It's probably telling us there's no internet access available, and that could be because of the gateway issue. So go ahead and log on as our domain administrator. So our domain controller is now virtualized and back up and running, and it appears to be working correctly. I could go into Event Viewer, but I'm not going to. I have verified I can still log on and log off the domain. The time is correct on it. I'm not getting any errors. I've got my IP address re-enabled again. As you can see, I've got my Xeon processors. I've got 2 gig of RAM installed, and all appears to be well with the system. Now, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down one more time, because the other thing I want to do, so I'll just go ahead and shut her down. The other thing I want to do is tell this virtual machine that in the event that Hyper-V is, the server that it's on and running on is rebooted, I want this machine to start up every time. So I'm going to go to File and Settings, and I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to go to Automatic Start, and I'm going to go always start this virtual machine automatically. We'll give it a delay of, let's say, 30 seconds. Go ahead and apply that. An automatic stop action will be to shut down the guest operating system. That way, if the Hyper-V server gets shut down for maintenance or for any other reason, that this server will then come back up on its own. So I'm going to go ahead and start it now. Good, our little exclamation point went out. Make sure I can log in. Okay, so far so good. Now I know this machine now has some updates to do as well, but what I would strongly suggest you do at this point is to do a backup of the virtual machine. Once you've converted your domain controller, you can use there's a free program out there called Veeam Backup. I've done a video on it a few months back. I did a video on Veeam backups. That's what I use to back up my virtual machines. You could also simply export the virtual machine at this point, and then you'll have a copy of it, a point-in-time backup, by exporting it. So if something were to go awry, you could re-import it. So I'll show you how to do that next, and I think I can do that with a live machine. We're about to find out. I'm just going to go ahead and log out here. And then I'm going to close that, and I think you can export it. If I right click on it and go to export, I'm going to go to where my Veeam backups are and exports, and I'm going to select that folder, click on export, and we'll see if it is successful here. Alright, so I didn't know this could be done, so I want to make a point-in-time backup of this virtual machine now that I've got it up and running and I've verified it's working. So what you can do is you can right-click on the machine and you can choose export while the machine is running, and then save it to a shared location on your network like I'm doing. And as you can see, the machine is up and running. and it is currently being exported under Windows Hyper-V. So that's a nice feature of Windows Hyper-V. You could also export your checkpoints as well. I don't have any checkpoints on this server. I'll probably end up doing a checkpoint after the export is finished. But this is an easy way to back up your virtual machines if you've got shared storage like I do on my Synology NAS. It just makes sense to store your backups on there for your virtual machines. It just makes one place to kind of organize everything here for you. Alright, so the machine has been safely exported. I'm going to go ahead and do a checkpoint as well. So I right click on it and I select checkpoint, and it should go out and create a checkpoint, so that if we screw something up moving forward, we have a way to easily go back to a previous version. Probably not a bad idea to do with a virtual machine. And it tells me the checkpoint has been created. Running application state wasn't included in the checkpoint. You can configure checkpoint options under the virtual machine settings. So we'll click OK, and now we have a point in time checkpoint. So I guess the big question is why would I want to convert my physical domain controller back to a virtual domain controller? Well, power saving. The unit I had running that virtual or that physical, I keep getting those two confused. Old age. The machine that I had my domain controller running on is an older i5 processor. That unit, when running by itself, uses between 80 and 100 watts of power just to run a domain controller. And while power here in the United States is cheap, we pay between 10 and 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So power here is fairly inexpensive. I know over in the EU, over in Europe and other countries, power is can be very expensive once you add your VAT tax and everything else to it. But here in the States, power is cheap. But I don't like to waste it. So if I don't need to have a physical machine running, consuming 80 to 100 watts, that's great, because you know my Dell server consumes about 250 when it's under load, sometimes 300 up to 330 watts. But keep in mind, I have my Exchange server running on there, I have a bunch of virtual machines running on there, and now I have my domain controller running on there virtualized. So I've economized and consolidated my power consumption to one big unit. The other thing that allows me to do, now that I have this other Dell server I'm standing right in front of, and that IBM in the rack, and they're all running Hyper-V and they're all running Windows Server 2016, I now have the ability to move those virtual machines easily around anywhere on one of my 3 Hyper-V servers. So that's the other added benefit that gives you, is it allows you to consolidate all of your virtual machines or all of your domain controllers, your mail servers, etc. into one location, and can save you some power consumption. So that's another reason I'm doing it. And it's all going to tie in with the Windows Lab series moving forward, because we are going to be doing some more Windows Lab videos we'll just suffice it to say we've got some other product reviews from Microsoft coming up as part of what I get is my Microsoft partner account. So I want to share those with you, because I've had a lot of requests for people wanting to see some of the enterprise level software that Microsoft has to offer. So part and parcel of that is getting my lab all configured and set up for that, so we can easily move stuff around. Now, seeing as I also have shared storage, namely that Synology NAS, I have iSCSI set up on there. I can share my images between Hyper-V machines easily. Another good reason to have a NAS at your disposal, whether it's FreeNAS or Synology or Unraid or whatever it is you use for your storage solution, just makes a good idea in a lab environment. It makes it easy to move things around. You saw how easy it was to create that physical to virtual Active Directory domain controller, and then move it around my network to where I needed it. So that's another benefit to using virtualization in your lab. All right, I've rambled on long enough, so I'm going to leave the video right there. We hope you found it entertaining and informative as always. Please give us a thumbs up down below if you liked the video. Leave your comments down in the comments section. If you are inclined to donate to our channel, we take PayPal, we take Patreon. We're back on Twitter. Yeah, I know, my constant battle with Twitter. I've decided to stop reading Twitter and just post to it, so that makes life a little bit easier. But anyway, I digress. But we are on Twitter. The link is down in the description down below and on our About page, so be sure to check us out there as well. Anyway, come back and see us again. We do appreciate your support, continued support. Our videos have been doing very well now that YouTube is kicked back into the fall season, so thanks again for watching. And please, don't forget, we'll see you on the other side.